Well, when I was in college, one spring break, my buddies and I decided to go down to San Miguel de Allende, which is a little like artist colony town just north of Mexico City. So we went to Nuevo Laredo, got on a bus, rode all night long, and we woke up in this little artist city. And I remember one particular night, we were sitting up on our rooftop and realized it connected to the rooftop of La Parroquia, this massive neo-Gothic cathedral that stands in the center of the city. And so we went out there that night, and I'll never forget sitting on the rooftop at night of this massive church. And as we sat there watching the sun go down, there were men that were singing in the church. They were singing hymns in Latin, so I couldn't understand most of what they were saying, but it sounded beautiful, and it was coming up, this voices of this choir through the skylight. And I'll just never forget, I'm not a particularly romantic guy, but I just remember sitting there and watching the sun go down over this colorful city, sitting atop this gorgeous building as this sound of worship rose up over me. And it was one of the first times in my life I was so struck by beauty, it made my heart ache. You ever had that happen? Where it was just more than I could take in. And I remember for me, it is that at that moment, this burning desire that I want to share this with someone. And I had never assumed I would get married. I thought, I don't know what God's going to do with that. I'd like to be, but whatever. But I remember feeling a yearning. God, I want to share this with somebody. And I remember looking over at my buddy, Ricardo, who was sitting there in his white undershirt. And I thought, Rick's great and all, but he's not really what I'm looking for. You know, like that's not what I meant. It's just a buddy. Like I want a love, I want a romantic partner in life that we go out into the highs and lows, the beauties and the tragedies of life together. And I remember longing for that and realizing, and what I wanted to start by saying to you tonight is that longing is good. That longing to pair up is good. That's Genesis 2 kind of stuff. That before sin, before the fall, as Adam looked out over the beauty of delight, the Garden of Eden, he had a longing to partner up with somebody. And as cool as the moose were and the raccoons, they weren't it. That he wanted someone that complemented him, that they could journey into life together. And that longing to be partnered up, to love somebody, is a good longing. And so as we enter back into this series on dating and marriage that we kind of took a break from, but now we're back in. As we enter back into this, I just wanted to tell you that longing is good, to want to share your life with somebody. And that's really why we're doing this series, because I want to help you as you journey through this decade where many of you in this room, maybe most of you, will be married before this decade's over. I want to talk with you with how do we navigate these relationships with one another well. And so we're back on the subject of dating tonight, right? And we're picking up where we left off. And where we left off was with a premise that dating exists for evaluation. Dating isn't a status that you sit in like we're dating. Dating is a process, a series of steps we move through to arrive at a particular end. And the purpose of the process of dating is to determine if some person is the person we want to spend the rest of our lives with. And what you're looking for as you move through that process with somebody is you're looking for character and chemistry, and you got to have both. You're looking for a deep character in them. Is there a godliness about them, a stability that will love me for better and worse? And is there a chemistry? Do we get along? Do I like hanging out with you? Right? What you're not looking for is someone to complete you. It's a modern myth, right? Because Jesus never married and neither did the Apostle Paul. And it's not like, well, they were just never complete, right? Jesus never really actuated his humanity. No, he was fine, right? And so you are a complete person before you get married, and you can't look to some other person to do that. If you go, I just got to find someone that will fill up all my vacancies and actuate all my gifts and make me feel whole and alive and complete in this world, that's too much freight to put on a human relationship. You put that kind of weight on a friendship or on a dating relationship, you'll crush the relationship. That's not what it's for, right? And yet there is a desire for many of us, maybe most of us, to link hands with someone and run on into forever together. And that's a good thing. And dating is a process, a modern process of evaluation where we go, is this the person that has a godly character and as I have chemistry with that we could run together? And so as we got on the topic of dating, we talked about who should you date? And we looked at 7 characteristics of who you should date. You want a believer in Jesus Christ, that the two of you are lockstep about the biggest issues in life. But not just someone who ascends to the deity, but a believer in Christ and a pursuer of Christ, that they're not perfect and you aren't either, but they're striving to be. As they strive to know him, they become more like him. And not just a pursuer of Jesus, you want someone that'll keep pace with you. That you're not trying to drag someone along. That's not fun for either party. That you're having to drag them to church or drag them to be someone that wants the things of God. It's not fun to drag people, and it's not fun to be dragged. So if you're going to date somebody, you want to go, are we running together in spirituality? Do they keep me at the top of my game of becoming a man or a woman who looks more and more like Jesus? That's what you want. And then we looked at more chemistry issues, like, are you theologically compatible? As we start to get closer, is there clarity about some of these specific convictions of how theology works, of what kind of style of church we're going to worship in? We looked at socially compatible. Do you like hanging out? Which feels so obvious, but I meet so many couples that they're like, she is a godly woman, he's a godly man, and therefore we must be married. But you see them after 5 minutes, they don't know what to say to each other, and it's painful to sit with them. You're like, how do you endure this, right? If sitting through a meal with that person is painful, you probably shouldn't link up forever. Philosophically or ministerially compatible. Do you have compatible visions for your lives? If one of them wants to live in New York and the other one wants to live in Calcutta, both can be godly, but maybe linking up is going to cause some stress. You might want someone that says, we have a similar pathway in life, philosophically, where we want to serve and minister and live. And then physically was the 7th one. Do you find them attractive? That's not the number 1 thing for the believer, but it is on the list. You shouldn't be repulsed by them, right? And then we talked about, whenever you talk about dating, you got to talk about 2 things. What kind of person, and then what process do you go through to find that person? You got to talk about the who, and you got to talk about the how. So we talked about the who, and then we got into how. What process do we go through to arrive at that person, right? How do I navigate the unstable waters in a way that's more exciting than depressing, right? And we looked at 7 things. Well, we started to look at 7 things. We got to 4, and then I just left you hanging, right? And so this is us trying to pick up the rest. How do you date? And we said that there's not a lot of passages in the Bible about dating you're not going to see. And Joseph said unto Mary, do you want to go to the Outback, spit an awesome blossom? That's not how the Bible's written. Dating wasn't the way they did it back then. Different cultures, different times have had different processes, but they've always been processes of evaluating, are you the kind of person I should be linked up with? And the Bible's filled with advice, wisdom about how to properly evaluate a potential husband and wife. And so we looked at 4 that I want to just look at briefly. The first one was, we said, how should you date? Prayerfully. Prayerfully. That before I enter into relationships with you, I enter into that relationship with God and soak in deeply passage like Romans 8 that says we know that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purposes. There's a wonderful stability that comes into your life when you know that. Cast all of your anxieties on him. Why? Because he cares for you. Perfect love casts out fear. When I realize the lover of my soul commands my destiny, works all things for my good, there's a stability that comes. And resting in the sovereign care of God takes the desperation out of dating. It gives you the stability that's the antidote to the anxiety that so much of modern dating is about. It's interesting, I heard just this week the prayer of St. Patrick. You know, St. Patrick of St. Patrick's Day. You're like, the patron saint of beer? That's not what he was for. He brought the gospel to Ireland, but he had a prayer attributed to him. This was his prayer in the morning. I don't know what your morning prayers are like. This was his. And it blew me away. He said, I arise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's might to uphold me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's eyes to look before me, God's ears to hear me, God's words to speak for me, God's hand to guard me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to protect me, God's hosts to save me afar and anear, alone or in a multitude. Christ shield me today against wounding. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lay down, Christ when I sit down, Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks in me, Christ in the eye that sees me, Christ in the ear that hears me. I arise today through the mighty strength of the Lord of all creation. I don't know what you think about when you wake up in the morning. But imagine thinking like that. I arise today through the mighty strength of the Lord of all creation who surrounds me and who's in me. A stability like that will keep you from going crazy when you enter the world of dating, right? So we enter in prayerfully, trusting God with our story, that the God who gave his life for me is going to take care of me, right? And then when you get that vertical connection clear, then you enter horizontally in with us, and as you begin to see people that you're interested in, you speak to them with clarity, was our next point. Clarity and initiation. Hey, I'd like to get to know you better. Would you like to go to dinner? Clarity and intentions. I'm not trying to get married tomorrow, but I'm not playing games with you either. I really am enjoying getting to know you, and you seem like the kind of person I could see myself with, so I thought we should get to know each other. And then clarity for an exit. But if at any point you're uncomfortable with this, you let me know. And I trust God with my life, and I trust him with your life, and he's going to take care of us. You give them clarity. And did you notice those first 2 points are connected? When you have the stability of knowing Christ is caring for you, you can provide people with clarity. So many people don't give clarity in dating. Why? Because they're scared. Well, I don't want to come out and tell her I like her, because what if she rejects me? She might. She might, right? And if her opinion is going to crush or make you as a human being, you are not a very stable person. But if you know no matter what happens, Christ loves me, Jesus commands my destiny, would you like to go to dinner? No, I'm okay. God loves me. God bless you. Right? And you can keep moving, right? And you can provide clarity when you lack anxiety, right? Because you trust in a sovereign God, right? And then ladies, it goes for you too. Clarity in response. Clarity in saying to them what you feel. I thought of it today. I didn't want to share this, but it fits here. When I was in college, I just had to hit time out on dating because I was a train wreck, a popular joke among my friends about my ineptitude with dating. But I remember as a freshman, this girl invited me to a date party, and so I invited her to one too, and our friendship circles were hanging out, but I didn't know what to do. Women confused me. And so I remember at one point, she came to me, and she just said, hey, I don't want to pressure you or anything, but she said, I really like spending time with you, and I don't know if you see this going someplace, but if you do, I'd be up for that. And I had no idea what to say. And I remember I gave like some lame, like, I don't know if you're attracted to me, maybe you're attracted to like the Jesus in me, or like something, I just like, some Christian nonsense that she's like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm attracted to you, weirdo. I'm not sure anymore. And I didn't know what to do. And so it took me a while before finally I told her, I can't believe it. I think you're great. There's nothing wrong with you. But no, I'm not in a place where I think I can clearly, I've got some issues. I'm not in a place where I can date. And she was like, okay, that's great. Thank you for that. And I remember her walking away, and I was just kind of dumbstruck by that amount of clarity. I was like, aren't we supposed to work through a complex web of intermediaries that ask one another if we like each other? She just came direct, and it was very clear. And ladies, it's helpful for a guy for clarity. Maybe you're not initiating the clarity, but maybe when he initiates with you, you don't ignore him, but you just say, you know what? I think you seem like a great guy, but I don't know that I see this going anywhere. And you give him the clarity on the way out. And then we talked about autonomy. When you are interested in someone and they're interested in you back and y'all start to spend time together, you may call it boyfriend and girlfriend and fabricate words like that, and I don't care if you do, but if by those words you mean, suddenly because I'm hanging out with this person, I've granted access to their body and they owe me certain things beyond what they owe any other believer in Christ, you're out of step with biblical categories. That in the Bible, they're either brother and sister or husband and wife. And until you take on all the responsibilities of caring for that person until death do you part, you don't get all the privileges that come with their body and their life. That's the Bible's hard line. So while you're dating, You just say, you know what? She might date somebody else. He might date somebody else. I don't have access to her body. You don't have access to his. There's a separation there. And you go, well, Ben, that sounds so difficult. Won't that produce a lot of tension? Yes! But that tension is meant to propel you through the process. That as you go, I really want to touch you, you got to go, but are you the person I want to spend the rest of my life with? No, not really, because I don't like talking to you. And then you go, then get off. Or then you keep talking and realize, I think this is the person, let's go. And you start to figure that out, right? And you go, well, Ben, that style of dating looks painful, but I promise you this, it's a lot less painful than the way we do it now, with all the physical coupling and uncoupling that we do. It's not just the Bible, it's science now, and it's always been the same because the Bible talks about the real world, but scientists are coming around what the Bible's been telling us all along, that when you do that, it's deeply painful to wire yourself to someone chemically and then keep pulling apart. That's difficult for you and for me. We're not meant to do that. And that's why number 4 was purity sexually. And I have so many pages of notes on this subject that I realized it can't be a minor point. I'm gonna have to do a whole other talk on that because there's a lot of complexities and a lot of hurts and issues around sex. And so we're doing a whole talk about it. We should do a whole series on it, but we're gonna do a whole talk about it next week. So I was looking at the schedule and I'm like, we're gonna talk about sex on the front lawn. Not, we're gonna talk about sex while we're on the front lawn. There's no good way to say it, but that's what we're going to do. Anyway, so let me get to the 3 points that this talk is about. I got to move a little quicker. What's point number 4? Or excuse me, point number 5. Point number 5 of how we date is graciously. Graciously. And you go, what does that mean? Well, here's what I mean. I think there's so much confusion, like you find someone attractive, they find you attractive, you express that to one another, there's mutual interest, and so you go, okay, and I meet so many people that they go, okay, there's mutual interest, now what are we supposed to do? What actually is dating? Like, how do we know if we're doing it right, you know? And you go, what is it? Is it a sales pitch? Am I running for office? Like, well, I think I would be a great husband for the following reasons. I'll vote for this. I'll never vote for that. I'll never raise taxes. Like, are you trying to convince them that you're a good deal? Is that what dating is? I fake it? What are you into? What are you into? I love that too. Yeah, I love art. And babies, love them, right? Do you put on a front and act like something else that you think they want, right? Do you try to stoke the flames of passion? I remember the first time I dated in high school, I'm like, what are you supposed to do? And my friends were like, well, Valentine's is coming up. You got to like write poetry and buy her all these gifts and really like do all this stuff to like romance her. And I'm like, until what end? To give one another a high five at the end of the night? Like what? Where's that supposed to go? And so you go, then what is dating for? What are we supposed to do? And other people will go, you know what? You just got to be authentic, man. It just got to be me. So I'm going to sit on the couch and watch TV. And if she wants to sit on my couch and hang out, fine. This is me being me. And you go, man, you be you, but you be a you that's like progressing in life, right? And so you go, what are we supposed to do? Well, identity determines activity. So let's be clear about who we're talking about here. And in Ephesians chapters 1, 2, and 3, Paul's explaining how God has chosen to adopt men and women into his family, sons and daughters, reconciling them to himself. That's the big story. And as God is building a family, we're reconciled not just to God, but to one another. And that has implications for how we treat each other. And so in Ephesians chapter 4, he says, I, therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There's one body, and one Spirit, just as you were called to the hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Paul's saying God has built one body, a community. And God has called himself Father over that community. And so if I say I'm not going to date people that don't have an allegiance to God as Father through the Son, Jesus Christ, if I say those are the people I'm going to date, the pool I'm going to date in, then you look around and what you're realizing is you are dating royalty. You are talking to a child of God. The word courtship and the word courtesy or courteous, it comes from to act with manners that fit a royal court. How do you act when you walk into the presence of royalty? With politeness and with respect, because I realize this is a person of value. It's not just a metaphor for us. That when you are a Christian, think about that, because it's not just the person you date. Any person you come across has a dignity stamped on them in the image of God, and then when they've come to Christ, that is a very son of the living God, daughter of God. So there should be a reverence in how you speak to them and treat them, whether they recognize it themselves or not. So I remember in high school being propositioned sexually by a girl. And I had never had that happen before, where she's offering herself to me, and I told her no. And it wasn't because I feared her dad. And her dad was kind of a swaggery guy that was like, I got a gun and I know how to use it. And I was like, you just come off to me as strange with that whole thing. And I wasn't scared of her older brother. But I remember being propositioned with that and thinking about, what am I going to do? And I had to think about it when I was in high school. But I felt like the Lord pressed into me, if you use her, you have an issue with me. If someone tries to use my daughter, your issue is with me. And I realized it's a reverence for God that's going to impact how I treat this girl, whether she recognizes the dignity of what she is or not. And so you go, if that's who I'm dealing with, what does it mean to treat them with reverence? It means graciously, because Paul goes on and says, but grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore, it says when he ascended on high, he led a coast of captives, and he gave gifts to men. Gifts is the same word as grace, that God has given grace, giftings to each one of us. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ until we all attain to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of fullness of Christ. You go, what does that mean? It means whenever I come in close proximity to another human being, then you say relationally, whatever the end may be, I want you to be a better person as a result of being in close proximity with me. Whenever you enter into a relationship with anybody, and particularly with dating, as you step in with a guy and girl, you go, I don't know where it's going to end. It may end with us as husband and wife forever. It may end with us parting ways. But either way, may the net result of your time with me be that you are a better person, because I used the grace given to me to build you up so you could attain the unity and the fullness of Christ. It's about being a blessing more than it's about impressing them. That when I get around another person, my energy is not in how do I impress them. My energy is how do I bless them? How do I care for them? So you go, what does that mean? Take them to dinner? Yes, but not to impress her, to get to know her. Share what you're learning. Paul will go on later to talk about speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. When Donna and I dated, we didn't try to combine our devotional lives. Now we must study the same book and at the same time. I'm like, you study whatever you want, and I'll study whatever I want. But when we go to dinner, we'll ask that question, what's God teaching you? I'm reading this great book, and she tells me about it. I'm like, I'll probably never read that book, but give me the cliff notes of it so I can learn it. And we're both learning and growing, and I'm learning things from her. And we do things we like doing together. We went rappelling. We went running together, and we realized we both love the outdoors, and she hates running. And I realized, do we have to have every pastime in common? I'm like, running, I can run by myself. If she hated the outdoors, that might be a problem. So I looked at that and went, we're good. I can run alone, but let's go outside, right? And we shared what we're learning, encouraging one another along the way. Do ministry things together. When Donna and I were getting to know each other, I wanted to pick her up, and she says, well, come to this youth event that I'm leading. And I went there and watched her and her friends minister to all these high school students. One of our first dates, I went down to a church in Houston where her and her band were leading worship, right? Watch how they interact with people. Encourage them with your words. That's what dating is for. It's for evaluating, but it's also for blessing. And I remember this really struck me when I was in college, because my sister came up into college while I was a student here. And I've told this story. There were buddies of mine that were joking about, I'm going to try to date your sister. And I was like, no, you're not. And I watched myself realize how not funny that was. And I looked at some of them and I'm like, you will never date my sister, right? And they're like, you don't know. I'm like, no, man, like, I'll kill you. And it's not like swagger, like, okay. I'm like, no, I'll kill you. Because I see that you try to romance and impress girls and you use them. And so they started to joke with me, well, no guy's ever going to be good enough for your sister. And I said, that's not true. That's not true. And so they asked me, well, who will be good enough? And I remember sitting and going, who would be good enough? And I thought about that. What kind of man would I want to date my sister? And I wanted a guy, not that would spend all his energy trying to get her to like him, because that's ultimately a very selfish thing. I want a guy that with every amount of time, voice, influence he has in her life, his bent to be, God, wherever you lead this thing, may the net effect of her proximity to me be a blessing in her life. That she trusts you more, God, loves you more as a result of our intersection, whether it leads to marriage or leads to us parting ways. May we be better people as a result of this time. Only time I did dating right in college was at the very end. I remember dating a girl, and we did the things I'm talking about. I've kept like, you don't belong to me, I don't belong to you, but we got to know each other, and over time, we spent time together, and we realized this is a deeply godly girl, and I'm pursuing the Lord too, and there's so much we like about each other, but relationally, chemistry, there just wasn't a fit there. And I remember driving in the car one time together and us realizing that, of just going, why isn't this working? You're so great, I'm so great. And I remember I just said it, and I said, you know what? I just think we're not a fit. And she said, I think you're right. And we were both like, that's so sad. And then there was this relief that we were both like, man, you see that too? Oh my gosh, I love that we see that. We should hang out. Well, no, actually we probably shouldn't hang out because we're both realizing this isn't working, and it gets confusing sometimes. But I remember at the end of that, you know what? That was the first relationship where when she left, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to be embarrassed for her to tell her friends what it was like being close to me. And years later, when I came back to lead Breakaway and I met her husband, I wasn't ashamed to look him in the eye. Because I knew when your wife was in close proximity with me, I treated her with politeness and respect. And I was proud of that. And I want you to have that. And so wherever it ends, you say, I'm going to treat them graciously. The grace God's given me, I use to build you up, trusting God will lead us together or apart in his good time, right? That's how you want to do it. And incidentally, being gracious is attractive, by the way. Proverbs 11:16 says, a gracious woman attains honor. It sounds horrible, but let me say this. I remember a girl in high school and a girl in college, two social situations I was in for extended periods of time, where there was a girl in each group that neither of them was the most physically attractive girl in the group. They just weren't. But every single guy asked them out. And you go, what is going on with that? And what was going on with that is they were gracious. And I remember being in circles of people where you would watch them. They would come up to people in the group and say, hey, I've been praying about that issue with your family. How's that going? They would bring gifts to people. They go, I know you're having a bad day. Here's the, and you saw them just be so gracious to people. And I would watch guys, non-Christian guys, be so confused. They were just like, I need to be near you. Because they just were like, there's something about you. Because graciousness is attractive. Because that's who you want to spend the rest of your life with. Someone who will be cool to you for better or for worse, right? And guys, it's the same with you. Proverbs 19 says, what's desirable in a man is kindness. I remember when I first got into the world of ministry, when I was a high school student, all my mentors were homely looking guys, but they all had beautiful wives. And I was like, how are you tricking them? Like, what are you doing? They're all like, let's open our Bibles. I'm like, what is the deal with these? Like, what's happening here? And what happened is they were honorable men, and they were kind. They were so kind. And if you got an attractive guy that's really into himself, that's cool, but it gets old. It gets real old. But you find a guy that's kind and a guy that's gracious, that's who you want to spend the rest of your life with. It is. We got to move a lot faster. All right, point number 6. is community. Community. That when you find someone that you're attracted to, the urge to pair off happens, and that's a good urge. But a challenge comes in our world today where there's too much pairing off of the dating process, and we lose what has been a great gift in the history of evaluation, and that is the voice of community. That we need community around us. You need community your same age for a dating pool. But you need a community around you that will help you evaluate. Proverbs 11:14 says, where there's no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there's safety. Proverbs 24:6 says, with many counselors, victory is sure. Back in the day, when a guy wanted to court a girl, he came and sat in the parlor of her house. Why? For safety. Because you don't trust some of these yahoos, right? And they would sit in her home, and her parents would be there to watch. How does he treat her? How does he treat us? And then he would leave, and they would help you evaluate that person. I'm not saying you suddenly got a date like that now, but what I am saying is that it helps to have evaluation around us. One of the greatest problems with modern dating is the loss of that. It's interesting to read modern statistics. They've been measuring how people meet their spouses since the 1940s. And since the 1940s, the categories of meeting your spouse through friends, through family, at work, and at church have all been going down, 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 down. Only two categories have gone up: bars and online. And right now in America, 1/3 of all married couples are meeting online. 1/3, right now. Now, I'm not disparaging meeting someone in those two places, but here's the danger of those places. When you're meeting someone online, it's just you and a screen with their data. You don't have your community around you, and that's dangerous. Or at a bar, your friends can't hear what he's saying, it's too loud. So they can say, he looks cute, but you don't know if he's cool or an idiot, right? And so we've lost the value of community, of people helping us evaluate, and we need that. We need people around us. I remember when I first started dating Donna, we went out and we met with a community of people. And I think that's the best way to do it in college. Have a big group of friends, guys and girls, and do stuff together, because you get to watch them, how they treat people they're not trying to sleep with. And you see if they're nice to people in general. And then as you hang out in community, you're getting to evaluate people. And then as you get to know somebody, man, you get certain voices around you, advisors that can speak into that love God and love you and have wisdom. And sometimes your best friend loves God, loves you, but they're not necessarily a source of infinite wisdom. You need wisdom around you. And so I remember when I was first interested in Donna, I came to her and said, I want to take you on a date. She said, pick me up at her church. And I showed up at her church, and the entire staff was there. I thought I was going to pick her up in the car. It was over an hour of me meeting everyone that had ever gone to church there. I mean, she was like the darling, because she led worship at the church, and they're like, that's our baby. All right, and I was like, oh man, this is a serious job interview, right? To get to go on a date with this girl, but I liked that. I liked that she had community around her. And man, when I was getting to know Donna, I wanted to ask her out around friends, so I took her rappelling with a man who was a mentor in my life, Steve Shaver, because I love Steve, and I wanted him to see us together and be able to help me see, are we a good fit? I wanted someone in my life that could speak into my life. In Song of Solomon, the love book in our Old Testament, it begins with the woman speaking, and she says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. When the book opens, she's already infatuated with this guy, and when you get infatuated with someone, you can lose clear thinking. And when you meet the Shulamite at the beginning of Song of Songs, she's there. She's looking at this guy, and she's like, I want his mouth on my mouth, right? But you see, as the book progresses, 4 people speak. The woman, the man, God, and the woman's friends, right? And you see her friends, as she extols her infatuation with this guy, when it's her friends' turn to speak, they say, rightly do they love you. Her friends who are not infatuated with him are able to say impartially, he is a right or proper person to set your affections upon. Some of you have been dating someone that all your friends and counselors have been saying to you, this doesn't look like a good fit. And what some of you do is you start cutting those counselors and friends out of your life. And that's a big mistake. You get people around you that are wise and loving, and you let them evaluate and tell you what they see. That's critical. Donna and I needed that around us, and you need it too. You need friends that will help you evaluate. And the last thing I would say is patiently. We date patiently, that we give it time. There's no rush into forever. 1 Timothy 5:22 is speaking about leadership in the church, but it applies to leadership in your life, the influence of a husband or wife. It says, do not be hasty in the laying on of hands. That's transferring authority. Nor take part in the sins of others. Keep yourself pure. Verse 23 is about drinking wine. We'll skip that one. Verse 24. The sins of some people are conspicuous, going before them to judgment. The sins of others appear later. So also good works are conspicuous, and even those that are not cannot remain hidden. What he told Timothy is, as you're teaching, as you're bringing up people that are going to have serious influence in this community, don't rush to make somebody a leader. He said, watch them. He said, because some people, their sins go before them. I knew you were trouble when you walked in. Right? Some of you are like, that guy is trouble. That girl is drama on her way in the door, right? Other people, you don't know right away. And as soon as you meet them, they'll look good, they'll be nice, they'll be friendly, they'll be interested in you, and you'll go, oh my gosh, love is an open door. And you'll just be so into them, and you don't realize he's going to try to kill you and take your money, right? My daughters, when they watch Frozen, they love the Prince Hans part. And I'm like, y'all don't get too into this guy. Because he's trouble, right? You watch him over time, because some people, they present really well. But over time, as you watch them, there are serious cracks in their character that will become fault lines in the pressure of marriage, and it'll crater the marriage. And you don't want that. You don't want to find out then. So give it time. Watch them. Some people, their sins follow after. They come in looking good, but you wait and you'll see it. The same with good works. They're conspicuous. They come over time. Right? And so I watch them and I wait. C.S. Lewis wrote a book on the 4 loves, and he picked the 4 Greek words for love. It's a great book. You can get the audio book and actually hear C.S. Lewis read it. It's amazing. But he's talking about agape, which we often equate with a godly love for all. Phileo, which is a brotherly friendship love. Storge, which is an affection. Eros, which is romantic passion. And in our world today, we typically go for eros. Am I sexually attracted to you? And then we hope there's some phileo, a sense of friendship or a affection or agape later. Right? And what I think would be wonderful is we decide to live as a Christian community, walking in and saying we are people who've received the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, that he loved us so much he gave his life for us, that when I trust in him, I'm made a child of God, and the people around me, if they've put their faith in him, that's a son of God, that's a daughter of God, and as we get together, we use the grace in us to build each other up graciously with one another. And we have an agape, a godly love for each other. And as we have that godly love, our deep brotherly friendship of I will go to war with you builds. And then as that phileo builds, then you find someone that an affection, a storge, you just like being around them, starts to grow. And then it becomes a romantic love. It doesn't always work out that way, but it would be beautiful if that's how we tried to walk into it. Of saying, I'm just going to love the people of God, love everybody, but as I dwell in deep community, I love these people, and over time, I see their character, I sense a chemistry, and then as the affections rise, we run on into forever together. But that takes time, and it takes trust. You've got to trust him. And I just hope that you'll believe a God who is willing to give his life for you. You can trust him with your heart and soul as you feel that ache to spend your life with someone. God will care for you. Some of you will have to wait. Isaac in the Old Testament had to wait until he was 40. Some of you may need to wait that long. But it's better to wait for the right person than to not wait and regret it deeply. Others of you, it might be your late 20s, something like that. But you wait. You wait. For me, I loved my single years of pursuing the Lord, and I wanted to do ministry, and I didn't want anyone to get in the way of that. And in due time, God put me in a ministry situation where I saw Donna leading worship, and I thought, we're doing the same kinds of things, ministering among people in similar ways, chasing God at the same pace it's meant to be. Right? I saw this happen with my family as my sister had a longing to go into mission work. And she knew medicine was an important part of that, so she started going down that track, realized I'm not a doctor, I think I'm more of a counselor. And as she went into counseling, pursuing missions in Africa, she meant a doctor pursuing missions in Africa. And they realized our lives are headed the same direction for the glory of God, let's run together. And you give it time, you wait. God will take care of you. Does that mean you'll get married when you want? No. Does it mean you'll ever get married? Maybe not for some of you. But here's the deal. If I trust that God gave the life of his son for me to forgive me, I can trust that he cares about the deepest things of my heart, and he does. And I hope that you'll rest in him, that the God who loves you commands your destiny. So I will wait patiently and entrust my heart to him and him alone.